Hi to whoever is watching this. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've read in November and giving a summary and my likes and dislikes of the book. I read a lot of books and it's really hard to keep track of what I've read and what the book was even about and my thoughts on it. So I thought at the end of every month, I'm gonna sit down and talk about all the books that I've read, just so I can go back and watch these videos and see what these books are about or what I even read. So let's get into it because we have 7 books to talk about. The first book is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. It is part of the Rose Hill series, and the first book is called Wild Love, which I read last month. So actually, just a disclaimer, I finished this in November. I started it in October, so technically I didn't read the whole thing in November, but it still counts. I actually did not like the first book, and I'm not going to go into it or else this video is going to be like 10 years long. But you might be wondering, why did I pick up the second book then? Well, Elsie did a really good job setting up the main character of this book in the first book. So I was very intrigued by West's character, West Belmont, which is the main character of the second book, and I wanted to know more about him and his story. So I'll give you a summary. I have my notes here on my laptop. So there's this chart-topping country singer called Skylar Stone, and she has had a streak of bad press, and she looks to escape to a small Canadian town called Rose Hill, and she meets this single dad, West Belmont, with 2 adorable kids. And there's this tug of war between her life as a celebrity and her fame, and then wanting to stay in this quaint, cute, small town, and kind of have a do-over, a new beginning, a new start. So what I liked about this book is I loved West's character. I thought he's a very happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't take things too seriously. He is always in a happy, good mood. And I really like that. I wish I was more like that, not taking things too seriously. So I really liked that about him. It's not enemies to lovers trope, which was the first book, and that's a huge reason why I didn't like it. This, I would say, is friends to lovers / celebrity normal person trope. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I made it into a thing. So yeah, I enjoyed that sort of trope in the book. Did not like the spice scenes. It was just too much. Elsie writes too much spice for me, for my liking, and I tend to kind of skip over them. Something about this series in general, I don't know if she does it in other books, but in this series, she writes in alternating POVs. So 1 or 2 chapters is going to be from the girls' view, in this case Skylar Stone, and then the other chapter will be West's side of the story, or his POV. And I don't really like that because I tend to like reading from the girl's point of view as a girl. I didn't really care to put myself in West's shoes. I thought it's an interesting concept. I just didn't really care for it personally. Overall, I'm gonna give it a 4.5. I really enjoyed this book. Second book I read is on my Kindle. It's called Fullness of Joy by Georgia Briggs. And the summary is as follows. I'm gonna just read it from my laptop here. Joy is only a bear. She doesn't understand Batushka's prayers or late night vigils. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, Batushka. I don't know, I'm assuming. Or why the dark winds rage against him. She doesn't care for the humans who constantly ask his advice, or the other bear, Misha, who takes up his time and attention. Joy only knows that Batushka needs her as much as she needs him, and she will never let anyone take him away. In this beautifully illustrated novel, readers will be immersed in the day-to-day world of Joy and her journey alongside the beloved monk who later became known as Saint Seraphim of Sarov. Young teen readers will be drawn to Seraphim's life with his animal companions. More mature readers, especially parents, will resonate with the strong undercurrents of love, fear, and faith made real in this lyrical tale by author Georgia Briggs, who also wrote the award-winning novel Icon. So that's the reason why I picked up this book, or actually it was recommended to me because I loved Icon by the same author, Georgia Briggs, and that's why I picked it up. It is a children's book. I don't know. I was surprised at the end that it's based on the life of Saint Seraphim because I forgot about that at the beginning. So that was like a really cool surprise. It's Christian fiction. And it has really cute illustrations that I enjoyed. Overall, I would give it a 4 out of 5 just because I felt like it was more geared towards kids than like adults. So that's why. But it's cute. It was a quick, light read. Moving on to I think I'm gonna close the blinds actually. Okay, so third book that I read this month is Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This is the winner of this month's books, okay? This is my favorite book of this month. I gave it a 5 stars right away. It's the only book that I gave 5 stars this month. So here is the summary. California's gold country, 1850, a time when men sold their souls for a bag of gold and women sold their bodies for a place to sleep. Angel expects nothing from men but betrayal. Sold into prostitution as a child, she survives by keeping her hatred alive. And what she hates most are the men who use her, leaving her empty and dead inside. Then she meets Michael Hosea, a man who seeks God in everything. Michael obeys God's call to marry Angel and to love her unconditionally. Slowly, day by day, he defies Angel's bitter expectation, until, despite her resistance, her frozen heart begins to thaw. But with her unexpected softening comes overwhelming feelings of unworthiness and fear. And so Angel runs back to the darkness, away from her husband's pursuing love, terrified of the truth she no longer can deny. Her final healing must come from the one who loves her even more than Michael does, the one who will never let her go. A powerful retelling of the story of Gomer and Hosea. Redeeming Love is a life-changing story of God's unconditional, redemptive, all-consuming love. So as you can tell, it's a Christian fiction, which I love when it's done properly, and this book I think did it properly. I think what I liked about it is that it kind of humanizes, I don't know if that's the right word, humanizes the story of Hosea in the Bible. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but yeah, this is what this book is based on. I think like if you read the story in the Bible, it's super, super wild and it's hard to kind of imagine it. But this book, I mean, it is fiction at the end of the day. We don't know if this is probably not what happened with Hosea, but it kind of makes sense of the story in a way by giving it a backstory and stuff like that. I don't know. It makes the story more possible, you know, if that makes sense. I loved the themes of unconditional love and forgiveness and being a light in the world. And the romance story was 10 out of 10, which does not hurt. I did not like Nothing. Yes, that's a double negation. I loved everything about it. There are some things that maybe other people might not like for example, the pacing. I've heard some people say, oh, it's too slow. There are parts where Angel keeps arguing with Michael over and over again over the same points. But I think given her story and her background and the trauma that she went through, it makes sense that she would argue, you know, and she wouldn't believe what he's offering her. So I think it's very realistic given the circumstances that she went through. So I don't think the pacing was an issue for me personally. Lots of heavy topics that might not agree with a lot of people. Like, you know, you have abuse, you have prostitution, child prostitution, you have human trafficking, like all of these very, very heavy topics. And I found it hard to get through some chapters because of how heavy it is. But overall, it's a 5-star book for me. I loved this book so, so much. Third book, well, it's not a book, it's a trilogy, so it's 3 books. It's the Mark of the Lion trilogy by Francine Rivers as well. I picked it up because I loved Redeeming Love and I wanted to read more of her work in Christian fiction. I only have the physical copy of the first book. The other 2 books I read on Kindle. I'm gonna give you a summary of all 3 books very, very briefly, and then we'll go into my likes and dislikes and how I would rank these books. In the first book, we see the fall of Jerusalem by the Roman Empire. We meet Hadassah, who is the only survivor of her family after the fall of Jerusalem, and she's taken as slave to the Valerian household, which is, they are Ephesians who live in Rome. And they're kind of amused by how different she is and how she acts very differently than the Roman way. And then they found out later on it's because she's Christian. That's why she's very different. We also meet Atreides, who is a Germanian slave, and he becomes a gladiator in the arena. It's really ambiguous at first why he's in the story and why there are chapters dedicated to him, but it makes sense later on because he is connected to Julia Valerian, which is one of the Valerian household people. And then Marcus and Hadassah have a romantic storyline in there, so that's there. The second book is called An Echo in the Darkness. So the first book, I don't know if I said already. The first book is called A Voice in the Wind. The second book, An Echo in the Darkness. And we follow Hadassah and Marcus's story separately. And then they reunite at the end. The third book is called Sure as the Dawn. And we follow now Atreides' story. He earns his freedom and he goes looking for his son. And he finds him with a widow named Rispa. And then you follow their story. They do have a romantic storyline in this book. So, what I liked, what I did not like in this book, and then I'll go into my ranking for these books, like which one I liked the most, the least, etc. I liked that it took place in the 1st century. I thought that was really cool. So it takes place in, we start off in the first book at around 70 AD. So Christ has been fairly recently crucified. And I thought that was really cool. Like, you kind of see the evangelical efforts of the apostles around the world, and you get to see characters from the Bible. Obviously it is fiction, but you get to kind of see characters in the Bible, like John the Apostle. Also Hadassah's dad is, I think Francine is alluding to him being the widow of Nain, I don't know how to pronounce that, who got raised from the dead by Jesus. So it's a really cool detail. You hear about St. Paul and the letter that he wrote to the Corinthians. Like, all of these references, I thought that was really, really cool, and I enjoyed reading about them. I loved Hadassah's character as well. I loved the romantic stories in there. I also liked, well, obviously it's Christian fiction, but it should be a given, but there's no spice in these books, which I really, really liked. What I did not like, it took me forever to get into the first book. It took me hundreds of pages to get into the first book. That's not okay, in my opinion. I think I should be captivated within the first chapter. but I kept reading it because I really, really, really loved Redeeming Love. And this series also has very, very good reviews. So I wanted to keep going to see when I'm gonna like get into it. Also, something that I did not like is the history piece. She spent a lot of time and pages writing about the history of the fall of Jerusalem and the Roman Empire and the emperors and the battles and all of that. And I'm like, I don't care for that. Like, I'm not here for the historical fiction aspect of it. I'm here for the Christian fiction aspect, the romantic aspect of it. So I found it a little bit too much for my liking. I think a 1-2 pager on the history is more than enough for me. But I do appreciate the amount of effort and research that she put into it because it's very, very clear. The third thing that I did not really like is sometimes it got too evangelical for me, too preachy. I understand that that is the point of the book. And we're talking about first century Christianity. So if people did not evangelize, we would not have Christianity. So I understand that aspect, but I just found it a little bit too much, and it got more preachy as the books went on. Like the third book, there was like pages of the history, like everything from the Old Testament, from Adam and Eve to the crucifixion, like literally saying all the details. Noah and the ark, Jonah, Daniel, like all of the stuff, Moses, the kings. And I'm like, I had to skip it because I'm like, okay, I already know these things. It was just a bit too much. Like it was, yeah, I don't know. I found it a little bit too preachy, too evangelical, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. But I personally was like, okay, I gotta skip a little bit of this. The biggest dislike, like of them all, is Julia's character. Julia Valerian, she's the sister of Marcus Valerian, who's connected to Hadassah. I've never read about a more annoying, insufferable character in my life. There was no redeeming qualities about her whatsoever. It was just, it was torturous reading the chapters where she's in. And I was hoping for a redemptive arc for her. It didn't come. Like the second book, An Echo in the Darkness, she falls really ill. She has like some sort of STD. And then she converts to Christianity at the end. Sorry, spoiler alert, but this is also for me as a video diary. I guess like a part of me is also thinking it's a bit unrealistic that everyone converted in the family. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic and too realistic. I don't know. But I understand like a couple people in the household, but the entire household, I don't know. It's just, yeah. I did not like the second book because Hadassah and Marcus were not together most of the time. It's just at the end that they reunite. And because I like romantic books and romantic stories, I was kind of looking forward to reading about their story in the second book, but it didn't come until the very, very end. So I'm not gonna say why that was the case. I'm not gonna give more spoilers. Okay, so here is my ranking of the 3 books. Which one did I love the most? I loved the third book the most. As Sure as the Dawn, which follows Atreides' story, the gladiator, the ex-gladiator. You get to follow Atreides and Rispa's story from the beginning and to the end, like throughout the entire book. And I really liked both of their characters a lot, actually. I would have put the first book, which is this Voice in the Wind, first if it wasn't for Julia's very annoying character throughout the entire book and how hard it was for me to get into it at the beginning. Like I said, she goes through the history for pages and pages, and it was really hard for me to get into. And lastly, the book that I liked the least, it would be the second book, An Echo in the Darkness, because I would have loved to see Marcus and Hadessa together more than just a couple of chapters at the end. But this is just me personally. I know it's not the point of the book. The point of the book was to showcase their separate journeys to God. So I understand why that was the case, why she put it that way. But yeah, so I'd say third book, and then first book, and then second book. That would be my ranking. Overall, I would give the series 4 stars, which is pretty good. I'm very generous in my rankings. The last book that I read is The Bodyguard by Katherine Center. Let's get into the summary. Hannah Brooks looks more like a kindergarten teacher than someone who could kill you with her bare hands. But the truth is, she's an elite bodyguard, and she's been hired to protect a superstar actor from his stalker. When Jack's mom gets sick, he comes home to the family's Texas ranch to help out. Only one catch: he doesn't want his family to know about his stalker or the bodyguard thing. And so Hannah, against her will and her better judgment, finds herself pretending to be Jack's girlfriend as a cover. Likes and dislikes. What I liked about this, I really like a fake relationship trope. I'm a sucker for it, so that's something that I liked. Number 2, there was no spice in the book. I really enjoyed that. I think this is like the thing that I like the most. Her job as a bodyguard, so cool, okay? I love when they give women such cool jobs like that. Another one that comes to mind is Love Theoretically, how the girl is a physics professor. Like, what? So cool. Like, women in STEM. I mean, the guy who's the celebrity, the superstar, Jack Stapleton, he should have like the cooler, job as a celebrity, as a superstar. But like, I found myself gravitated towards her job. Like, she has the cooler job here. Another thing that I liked about this is the pacing. It gets to the point, it's not rushed, but it's also not dragged out. Don't get me wrong, I do like a slow burn romantic story, but I also do enjoy something like this where, you get to the point. It's not a big book at all. Like, it was a very, very quick read for me. So I really like the pacing of this book. I loved Jack's little quirks that Katherine had put. It kind of humanizes him as a celebrity. So I really enjoyed that. My dislikes. Some of the dialogue was very childish. I'll read you an example. To preface, Hannah Brooks, the main character, the bodyguard, is having an argument with one of her friends, her best friend, Taylor. I'm not going to say why. I'm not going to spoil it. But this is the dialogue. You just forfeited our entire friendship. You just gave up every movie night, every margarita Friday, every goofy GIF exchange, I don't know, every sleepover, every Galentine's Day, every fantasy road trip, every hug, and every atom of admiration, warmth, and affection you could ever have had with me, right? You gave up borrowing my jeans with the rainbow pockets. You gave up book recommendations and homemade birthday cards and late night tacos. And you gave up the best next door neighbor ever, too, because I'm definitely moving out. I read this and I'm like, what is this? Are we in elementary school? Like, who says this? These are 2 adults, okay? Like, I'm assuming they're in their late 20s, okay? These are 2 people with careers, like, very cool, very, I don't know. They're very advanced in their careers, okay? And then you say stuff like that, like, and there's like 1 or 2 more stuff like that where it was just giving me childish vibes times 10. So that was like a bit weird and it took me out of the zone. Another thing I didn't like is there's a contradictory messaging in the book where the whole premise is like, you have to love other people and you have to allow yourself to love other people because you're doing a service to yourself. But then at the end of the book, you find out that she never forgave Taylor fully. The 2 people that were having the argument here, like, Hannah never fully forgave Taylor and she doesn't like love her, you know? And I'm like, this is very contradictory. Like, why? It would have been nice at the end if she like forgave her and they went back, you know, to being civil or at least acquaintances. I understand that, you know, she hurt her on a deeper level. I understand that. But at least like show that you forgave her and like that you're civil with one another. But it just seemed like she's still kind of standoffish and like she doesn't want to be near her and talk to her, whatever. I could be wrong, and she might have forgiven her and like they're back to somewhat of a civil ground, but it's just not the vibe that I got from them at the end. Overall, I would give this a 4.5 stars. And that is it for November books. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope my future self enjoyed this too, looking back at the books that I've read.